So what is fast fashion, and how is it affecting and impacting the environment?
Well, the reason we're even discussing fashion is because of the environmental impact that fashion has. And the term fast fashion is a description of the fact that we now have, rather than 4 seasons, we have
52 seasons.
52 seasons. We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
52 seasons of change. So one of the things that that you want to cover in this conversation that you and I started talking about earlier was the fact that synthetic fabric has become so popular. But we want to unpack that for a minute, which means that most of the fashion out there today is, and I say most because I think it's actually more. I think it's about 60% of all clothing is now made of polyester. Okay, which means it's overtaken. Synthetic has overtaken natural fibers for our clothing choices. The thing about that is when you had 4 seasons of fashion, that was predicated upon the fact that you could not replenish natural resources quickly enough to get the amount of cotton you needed to create that kind of insane production. So in other words, that production, that increase in production is a reflection of the increase in use of synthetic fiber.
Yeah.
So if you force the industry to stop using synthetic fiber, as an example, it would immediately reduce the production of clothing. So the fact that we're now making clothes out of plastic, as we're making everything out of plastic, we are now able to make more clothing much faster and go from 4 seasons to 52 seasons. The average person, right, and how that translates is the average person right now is from 15 years ago keeps their clothes half as long. So 15 years ago, you bought a shirt and you kept it for a period of time. Now only 15 years later, you keep your clothing half the time.
Yeah.
Because you can go get another garment, cheaply and quickly. Now again, that garment is not going to be made oftentimes of cotton. It's going to be a polyester blend or 100% polyester.
Synthetic blend, yeah.
Right, which means also that we're dealing with the same thing as a plastic bottle. The biodegradability of this is terrible. So it's going to sit in landfills for years and years and years and years. So all the clothing that's being produced right now for 9 billion people that is made of synthetic fibers is going right into the landfill. Half as quick, as fast.
Right.
It used to, at least you would wear it longer. And now it's going into the landfill if it's not being repurposed, because, of course you've got Salvation Army and Goodwill. You've got places where people donate clothing to be repurposed, but very, very little clothing is ever recycled.
And only I think 1% of what is repurposed is actually recycled.
1%, right. So 1% gets, right. So 1% of what's produced gets repurposed.
Yeah.
And a percentage of that is recycled.
Yeah.
So if you're wrapping your head around that, it's such a small amount that is actually that we're able to use a second time. That basically, like a water bottle, it's disposable. I mean, it's single use. It almost becomes single use.
It almost becomes it, pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's all of this collective behavior that begins to destroy the planet's capacity to sustain an environment that is, fresh water, healthy soil, and clean air. We start to slowly, degrade the quality of everything when you are using synthetic materials to produce things that you then just throw away. So that the amount of gas that is released from, as an example, a synthetic product compared to cotton
Right.
it's something like, I forget the exact figure, maybe 15 times. It's something it's quite significant as well. So you've just got layers of problems that you create when you use synthetic materials to produce anything but clothing. I mean, one thing you might argue is a computer lasts 5 years for the average person. You keep it for 5 years. Okay. If you keep a shirt for, 6 months, if you keep a shirt for 12 months and then you're just done with it because you can get another piece.
Yeah.
I mean, the turnover of that it overshadows the production, the use of plastic in other areas of production. So in other words, why we're having this conversation is fashion is an enormous contributor to global pollution.
Yeah.
I mean, big time.
Yeah.
But it's probably one of the most overlooked contributors because people don't think of their clothing as plastic. Even when they're wearing a plastic shirt, they're not thinking of it as plastic. It's
more
polyester.
sensation.
They give it cool names like polyester and viscose.
Yeah,
I forget all of these different. But here's the most important thing you can do if you want to make a difference: is check the label of your clothing.
Yeah.
Stop buying plastic clothing.
Yeah.
Check the label just like you check your food. See what it's made of. Now, again, somebody's going to say, well, cotton has its own problems. I don't deny that. There's no, guys, every material that we make something from is going to produce some level of problem to solve.
Yeah.
Because when you're producing anything at the current levels we produce things, there's going to be an issue. It's practically impossible for you to produce something times 9 billion over and over and over repeatedly without there being some type of impact.
Yeah.
Like collateral damage would be the right word. There's no way to escape the collateral damage of 9 billion people on a planet consuming.
Yeah, just excessive.
So even if we were using completely biodegradable products, natural dyes, there's still going to be impact. There's no way to get away from impact. In other words, there's no perfect system. So there's just a natural give and take that exists in the production of products for human consumption. But we can make a difference by also mitigating the damage, offsetting what we've accepted as acceptable amounts of damage or problems. Because again, you're not going to stop anything from happening.
Yeah.
You're only going to interfere. You're only going to interfere with the levels of in the side effects of the production by limiting or changing the materials. You're not going to stop completely the issue.
Yeah, you're only encouraging the corporations that are investing in these fast fashion products, right?
Well, exactly. Companies like H&M, all these companies that are at such a high rate of producing materials, these guys they're the worst contributors to this because they're just like the Coca-Cola company. When you look at how many plastic bottles Coca-Cola produces and how many bottles are like consumed and thrown away in a day, it will literally overwhelm your lot. You just like it's hard for me to wrap my head around those figures, around that concept. So what I want to encourage people out there to do is start looking at your labels. Start investigating where your clothing comes from, what materials are used to make it, and then keep it for longer periods of time. Buy quality products. keep them for longer, make sure they're made of sustainable materials, and start, again, voting with your dollar. As a consumer, the best that you can do, with a corporation is to let the corporation know you don't support that product.
Right.
That's all you can do, really.
Yeah.
You can post about it on Twitter, you can gripe about it on Instagram, but the reality is corporations, only respond to figures.
Yeah.
And so once they're not making money in a particular area, they'll divert resources to another area. So, and take the food industry, for example. Once people really got, globally, like more interest and more, like the word organic became a household term, and people started understanding the difference between conventional and organic, and there was at least a distinction made, so that the shopper knew, wow, if this is all sprayed in pesticide, but I didn't know, that was a choice. Once this consumer became more educated, and more aware, you saw the grocery store aisles that carried natural or more less ingredients of a particular kind,
right.
more conscious ingredients and more sensitive and careful construction of these foods. Once these became high in demand, you saw the grocery store shelves become more populated with them, and you saw that even in these sort of stores where you would imagine no organic, food would be found, suddenly there is an entire, an entire section, devoted to it.
Yeah.
So it does tell you that consumers make a difference.
Yeah,
but it
definitely.
tells you we make a difference by what we consume, not by what we say.
Yeah.
So talking about this is not going to change it.
Yeah.
You must literally start changing how you consume fashion.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And considering that when you actually try to recycle and repurpose it, such a low percentage that actually does get recycled, repurposing it in a way where you give it to someone as opposed to just throwing it into the trash
100%.
would be beneficial as well.
And just the very idea that you're going to even repurpose something outside of giving it away, that it's going to end up somewhere beneficial. It's not. Like the 1%.
Yeah.
That's not going to change anything.
Right.
So for you to say, well, I recycle, that's not as powerful. That's not as impact. You can't feel the impact of that the way you can feel it when you stop buying it, when you change your consumption.
Yeah.
That is much different impact than if you continue the same consumption habits and then say, oh, well, I'm going to put that in recycling and do that. Again, the capacity for us to recycle materials, we just simply don't have it. Technologically, it's not scaled enough to even deal with the amount of production versus the ability to recycle. It looks like this.
Right.
There's just no comparison.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're going to make a change.
Okay.